I almost walked past the shop. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after we buried our mother, and I was heading to the pharmacy 2 blocks down. The pawn shop on Garfield Street had a dusty window I had never paid attention to before. Something made me slow down. There was a glass display case just inside the door. On a strip of faded velvet sat my mother's jewelry. I knew every piece. The gold bangle she wore every Sunday. The teardrop earrings my father had given her for their 10th anniversary. The brooch with the blue stone she called her church piece, kept wrapped in soft cloth in her top drawer. My brother Darius was standing at the counter. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was leaning on the glass with one elbow, gesturing at the owner like a man completing a normal transaction. Like the bangles and earrings and brooch in that case were just old furniture. He hadn't seen me yet. My hand went to the door handle. Then I stopped. Something told me to wait. To watch. To understand what was happening before I reacted. I let go of the handle. I stood very still on the pavement, and I let it happen. The owner counted out bills and slid them across the counter. Darius picked them up, folded them once, and put them in his jacket pocket. Then he turned and saw me through the glass. For a moment nothing moved. He looked at my face and his expression did something I will never forget. It didn't fall into guilt. It shifted into something almost like amusement. He pushed open the door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. "Relax," he said before I could speak. "It's just stuff." I looked past him at the display case. The bangle. The earrings. The brooch. "That's Mom's jewelry, Darius." "Was Mom's," he said. "She doesn't need it anymore." He adjusted his collar. "I needed the money more than a box of old things needs to sit collecting dust." I felt grief and rage rise together, so tightly woven I couldn't separate them. "When did you get into her safe?" he asked. His eyes shifted just a fraction. "I've always known the combination." That was a lie. My mother had changed that combination 2 years before she died. I was the only person she told, which meant Darius had forced it open. I said nothing. I let him think I believed every word. I went back to the house that evening. My mother's house was still mid-estate process, so both Darius and I had access. I used my key, turned on the hallway light, and went straight to the small room off the kitchen where she kept her important things. The document box was on the shelf where it always lived. But it was wrong. The lock on the latch had been pried. The metal was bent outward, sharp at the edges. The lid didn't sit flush. Opened it. The box had been gone through. Papers were out of order. A folder that always sat at the back was now at the front. The small envelope of photographs had been moved. I went through everything carefully, making a mental list. The jewelry inventory my mother had written by hand. Gone. A sealed envelope I had seen but never opened. Gone. A set of folded papers I had noticed while helping her find her insurance card. Also gone. I stood in the quiet room for a long time. He hadn't just taken the jewelry. He had taken documents. And people who take documents are people trying to control a story. Put everything back. Then I took out my phone and started making notes. By Thursday, the calls from relatives had started. Our Aunt Portia called in the morning. Our cousin Wade called in the afternoon. Our mother's oldest friend, Miss Elaine, sent a text. And that surprised me most, because Miss Elaine was not a woman who involved herself in family matters. Each message carried the same shape. They were sorry to hear I was having a hard time. They hoped I could let go of the small stuff. 2 of them used the same phrase. "Your mother wouldn't want conflict." I sat with those messages and understood exactly what had happened. Darius had called them first. He had told his version, the one where he was simply managing the estate, doing what needed to be done, and I was reacting emotionally to a minor family decision. It was a smart move. The people who loved our mother also loved him. They wanted the easier story. And the easier story was that I was upset about things that didn't matter. I replied to each message with the same calm line. "Thank you. I'm okay. I'll reach out soon." Then I put my phone down and thought carefully about what I had found in that document box. I went back to the house on Saturday morning while Darius was out. I moved slowly through the rooms the way my mother had taught me to look for things, starting from the obvious places, working toward the ones that required a reason to look. She had always said the things worth keeping were never in the most obvious places. I found it behind a row of framed photographs on the bookshelf in her bedroom. Not inside the frames, behind them, flat against the wall, held in place by the weight of the photos leaning back. A plain white envelope, unsealed, with my mother's handwriting on the front. Not my name. Not Darius's name. Just 2 words in her small careful letters. For afterward. Inside were 2 sheets of folded paper. The first was a handwritten list. Assets. Properties. Counts. A storage unit I hadn't known about. Specific jewelry pieces, each described by name, origin and estimated value. Everything itemized with dates. The second sheet had the name of a law firm at the top, Haverfield and Associates. Below it, in my mother's handwriting, were notes. Questions she had asked. Answers she had written down. At the bottom of the second sheet, circled twice. My name. I called Haverfield and Associates on Monday morning. The woman who answered transferred me to a paralegal named Mr. Abra, who was careful and polite and asked me twice to confirm my name before saying anything else. When I told him I was calling about my mother's estate, Cecile Drummond, I heard him pause. "I'm glad you called," he said. "We've been expecting to hear from you." He explained that my mother had come in 14 months before she passed. She had drafted documents to formalize her estate plan, but asked them to hold the final version while she made some decisions. Then her health declined quickly. "Was the will finalized?" "Yes. The will as drafted was signed," he said. "But there's a procedural issue. The witnessing process has a technical deficiency. It's not void, but it wouldn't survive a direct challenge without supporting documentation." I felt the ground shift. "So the estate is vulnerable," I said. "The estate is currently unresolved," he said. "Until probate is properly finalized, every asset is technically open." That was the moment I understood exactly how much trouble we were in, and exactly how much my brother didn't know about what he had just done. I went to the pawn shop on Wednesday afternoon. Not to buy anything back. To understand exactly what Darius had put on paper. The owner, Mr. Finch, was cooperative once I explained I was the daughter of the woman who had owned the items sold the previous week. I showed him my ID and the handwritten list from my mother's envelope, each piece described by name and value. He pulled out the transaction receipt without being asked. I looked at it carefully. Darius's full name, his current address, his government ID number. His signature at the bottom, confirming that the items were his legal property to sell. He had signed a document claiming ownership of assets that were still part of an unsettled estate. In a situation where ownership had not been legally transferred to either of us, that signature was a serious problem. Mr. Finch made me a copy without being asked. He had a practical, quiet way about him that I respected. "Family stuff," he said as he handed it over. "Family stuff," I said. I folded the copy into my bag and thanked him. Then I walked out and stood on the pavement for a moment, letting the weight of what I held settle. He had made everything traceable. I kept coming back to one question. Why had Darius moved so fast? The estate wasn't formally opened yet. Probate hadn't been filed. Our mother had been gone less than a month. Why would someone rush to a pawn shop 3 weeks after a funeral? The answer came from an unexpected place. Our cousin Wade had left me a voicemail earlier in the week, checking in. He meant well, but he talked the way he always had. Long sentences that wandered. In the middle of the message, almost as an aside, he said, "I know Darius has had a tough year with the business and everything." Called Wade back. He told me, carefully and with obvious discomfort, that Darius's restaurant supply business had been struggling for over a year. He had borrowed from at least 2 private lenders. There were unpaid invoices. He had recently let go of 2 of his 3 employees. He was in real debt. The kind that comes with phone calls and pressure and a timeline. He hadn't gone to that pawn shop out of arrogance. He had gone out of desperation. That changed how I thought about everything. Not in a way that softened my feelings, but in a way that made the shape of the problem clearer. Mr. Abra asked me to come in on Friday. He had prepared a summary, and when I sat across from him at the small meeting table, he walked through it with calm precision. The estate contained the house, 2 savings accounts, a small rental property on the east side, and personal property including the jewelry, or what had been the jewelry before Tuesday of the previous week. The pieces your brother sold, he said, were specifically listed in your mother's draft estate documents as personal property with designated provenance. She attached notes to each item describing its origin and sentimental value. Meaning they weren't just items to be distributed generally, I said. Meaning they had documentary significance to the estate. When an item with that kind of documented status is sold by someone without legal authority, before probate is finalized, before ownership is formally transferred, it creates a legal problem. He looked at me. The sale may constitute unauthorized disposal of estate assets, he said. He let that sit. What does that activate? Yes. It depends on what the estate documents say, he replied. And that, he added, sliding a folder across the table, is exactly what I'd like you to look at. The folder contained a section of my mother's draft estate documents that Mr. Abra had highlighted in pale yellow. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear once he walked me through it. The documents contained a clause, one my mother had added in handwritten notes during their last meeting, addressing what would happen if any estate asset was disposed of without proper legal authorization before probate concluded. The clause stated that unauthorized disposal of designated personal property would be treated as a breach of estate integrity, triggering a full review. In such a review, the party responsible would be subject to removal from beneficiary consideration, pending the court's assessment. I read that section 3 times. She put this in intentionally. Yes. She did, said Mr. Abra. She was specific about it. She said she wanted protections in case things got moved before they were supposed to. I sat back slowly. My mother had been sick. But her mind had been working. She had seen something coming, maybe not exactly this, but something like it. She had built a wall around the estate while she still could. And Darius had walked straight into it. He doesn't know about this clause, I said. Mr. Abra looked at me carefully. Almost certainly not. I didn't call Darius. I didn't text him. I didn't bring it up at the brief, awkward family dinner at Aunt Portia's house that weekend, where he sat at the head of the table acting like a man with nothing to worry about. He told a story about a business deal he was working on. He laughed at his own jokes. He refilled his glass twice. I watched him. There is a specific kind of confidence that comes from believing you've gotten away with something. It has a looseness to it. A willingness to keep talking, to fill silence, to explain things that nobody asked about. Darius had that confidence all weekend. After dinner, as we were getting our coats, he clapped me on the shoulder. "You're doing okay?" he asked. It was not really a question. It was a performance for the relatives nearby. "I'm fine," I said. "Taking things one day at a time." He nodded, satisfied. Over the next week he started talking more. Texts to the family group chat. A call with Wade that Wade told me about afterward. He was settling into the feeling of safety, expanding into the space. He bragged at one point that he had dealt with some of the estate's loose ends before things got complicated. I saved every message. The voice message came on a Tuesday evening. He had called Aunt Portia, not me, and she had listened and then forwarded the recording with a note. "I thought you should hear this. I'm not sure he's being fair to you." In the message, Darius explained his version to our aunt. He talked for several minutes. He said the jewelry was going to waste. He said our mother had promised it to him verbally years ago. He said he had taken what was already his. He said I was making this into something it wasn't. He said it all clearly into a phone to another person in a recorded message. I also had 3 texts from earlier in the week. In one he had written, "I already took care of what needed to be taken care of." You don't have to worry about the jewelry. I handled it. In another, Mom's stuff is mine to manage. I'm the one who was there for her at the end. A man who believes he has gotten away with something will eventually say too much. He just needs to feel safe long enough. I forwarded everything to Mr. Abra. I think this is what you were looking for. He replied within the hour. This is very helpful. Let's talk tomorrow. The estate filing happened quietly, on a Thursday morning. Mr. Abra handled it. I didn't need to be in the room. He filed the formal probate petition with the supporting documentation, the draft will, the clause notes, the asset list from my mother's envelope, and the evidence of the unauthorized jewelry sale. The filing triggered an automatic legal hold. All accounts tied to the estate were placed under court oversight. No withdrawals. No transfers. No disposal of additional assets without court authorization. Everything frozen while probate was reviewed. I went to work that day like any other day. I answered emails. I made coffee. I ate lunch at my desk. 3 p.m. my phone buzzed. A text from Darius. Why is there a hold on Mom's accounts? Did you do something? I read it once. Then I set the phone face down. I had not done something petty. I had not acted out of spite. I had filed a legal document to protect an estate from further unauthorized action. There was a difference, and I knew the difference clearly. I waited an hour. Then I replied, I'm not sure what you mean. Is everything okay? His next message came in 40 seconds. Don't play dumb with me. I didn't reply again that evening. He called 4 times that Friday. I let all 4 go to voicemail. The first was calm and businesslike. He said there had been some kind of banking error, and he needed me to call back so we could sort it out together. The second was less calm. He said the hold was affecting his ability to manage some payments, and it needed to be resolved quickly. By the third call, the pretense was mostly gone. He said he had bills due. That some things couldn't wait. That I needed to stop whatever I was doing and think about the family. The fourth was short. Just his voice tight and flat. Call me back. This is serious. I called Mr. Abra instead. He confirmed the hold was in effect and any attempt to challenge it would go through the court, not through me. I was not personally blocking Darius. The legal system was doing what it was designed to do when someone disposed of estate assets without authorization. That evening I sat in my apartment and thought about the past few weeks. About standing outside that pawn shop. About choosing to wait and watch rather than react. Some people think silence is weakness. What they don't understand is that some fights require patience more than volume. He appeared at my door on a Saturday afternoon. I had been expecting something like this. He knocked twice fast and hard, the way he knocked when he wanted you to know he was there. I opened the door and looked at him. His shirt was pressed, his shoes were clean. He had come prepared to be persuasive. Can I come in? He said. I stepped back from the door. He sat on the couch without being invited and started talking before I had even closed the door. He said he'd been thinking. That things had gotten out of hand. That family was more important than money and he hoped we could move past this. He said he was sorry. He said it the way people say sorry when they want something. I sat in the chair across from him and kept my face still. I nodded in the right places. I said I hear you and I appreciate that, and I know this has been hard for both of us. He relaxed slightly. His shoulders dropped. So we can sort this out between us, he said. Get the hold lifted. I think things are already moving in the right direction, I said. That was true. Just not in the direction he thought. He came back the following Tuesday. This time he was less formal. More himself, loose, wide, filling the space the way he did when he felt safe. He explained again why he had taken the jewelry. He said he had known our mother wanted him to have it, even if she hadn't written it down. He said it was complicated, the business, but he had a plan. He just needed the hold lifted to access funds and get moving. He talked for a long time. I asked quiet questions, the kind that sounded like I was simply trying to understand. The kind that kept him talking. He told me which lenders he owed money to. He told me the amounts. He told me the timeline. He described the 2 items he had removed from the document box, a property deed and an insurance certificate. He had taken them, he said, just to keep them safe. He had taken documents relating to assets he didn't own so I couldn't find them. Matey. I let him keep talking. My phone was on the table between us, face up, with the voice memo app running. When he left, he seemed relieved. He thought we had reached an understanding. What we had actually reached was something very different. The court documents arrived at his address on a Friday morning. I know this because he called me 17 minutes after they would have been delivered. His voice was a different version of itself. Not angry exactly, but tight, pressured. Like someone who had just realized the floor beneath them was not quite as solid as they believed. There are court papers here, he said. Official ones. From the probate court. Okay, I said. What does this mean, formal hearing? It means the court is reviewing the estate, I said. That's standard when there are questions about assets. What questions? About the jewelry sale, I said. And some missing documentation. There was a long pause. I explained all of that, he said. The jewelry was mine. I told you. Darius, I said, keeping my voice even. I think you should talk to a lawyer. Another pause. How serious is this? He asked. For the first time since I had seen him at that pawnshop counter. Relaxed, confident, folding those bills into his pocket. He sounded genuinely frightened. I think it could be quite serious, I said. I really think you should get some help. Things shifted in the family over the following 2 weeks. It started with Aunt Portia. She called on a Sunday and asked if we could meet, just the 2 of us. We sat at a coffee shop near her house. She folded her hands on the table and looked at me with the careful expression of a woman reassessing something she thought she understood. I told her everything. Not emotionally, clearly and in order. The pawnshop. The document box. The missing papers. The clause in the estate documents. The recordings. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet. Then. He told me you were making trouble. I know, I said. He said the jewelry was something your mother had promised him. My mother kept a written inventory of every piece, I said. She noted what she wanted done with each one. None were noted as going to Darius. Aunt Portia looked out the window. I feel like a fool, she said. You believed someone you love, I said. That's not foolish. That's just being family. She patted my hand. Then she made 2 calls right there at the table. To Wade and to Miss Elaine, and told them both in her direct way that the story was more complicated than they'd been told. Mr. Abra called me with news on a Wednesday morning. The estate review had progressed further than he initially anticipated. As part of the court's examination, they had requested a full asset disclosure, not just the items already documented, but everything connected to the estate in any form. What that process uncovered surprised even me. My mother had been more careful and thorough than I had known. Beyond the house, the savings accounts, and the rental property, there were additional assets not part of any conversation she and I had ever had. A second investment account opened quietly 12 years ago. A small commercial space she had been leasing to a tailor on Beacon Street for 8 years. And a structured financial instrument, a trust account, that had been building value steadily over time. The jewelry, Mr. Abra told me, had been listed under a specific designation in the estate documents. Personal property of symbolic value, not the primary inheritance. Deliberately visible. Deliberately accessible. I read that again. Deliberately accessible. My mother had known what she was doing. The jewelry was never the most important thing. She had put it somewhere visible. Somewhere a person in a hurry, someone desperate, someone careless with her legacy, would look first. She had used it as a signal. The formal transfer process began the following week. Mr. Abra guided me through each step. The court had reviewed the unauthorized sale, the missing documentation, the recordings, and the handwritten clause in my mother's estate notes. The conclusion was straightforward. Darius had disposed of estate assets without legal authority, and had triggered the exact provision my mother had written in. The process was not fast. It moved the careful, procedural way that legal things move. But it moved. Each step was documented, which meant each step was real in a way that couldn't be undone by a conversation or a change of heart. The court doesn't adjust its findings because two siblings have a difficult phone call. I attended 2 hearings. I was calm at both. I answered what I was asked. I provided documentation when requested. I let Mr. Abra speak when appropriate, and I spoke when it was my turn. At the end of the second hearing, the presiding officer made a preliminary determination. In light of the documented breach of estate integrity, the unauthorized sale of designated personal property prior to probate finalization, the beneficiary status of Darius Drummond was to be reviewed and suspended pending a full assessment. I sat very still when I heard that. I didn't celebrate. I just sat still. The court filings became a matter of public record. That is the part about legal proceedings people don't always think about in advance. Once something enters the court system, it belongs to the record. Darius's name was in the filings. The unauthorized sale was in the filings. The missing documents were in the filings. The amounts he owed private lenders, which came up as part of the motive assessment, were in the filings. His business contacts found out. 2 called to ask questions. He had no good answers. The private lenders, now aware that his expected inheritance was under legal suspension, made contact of their own. His support inside the family, already weakened by Aunt Portia's conversations with Wade and Miss Elaine, fell away almost completely. People who had believed the simple version found that it no longer held together. He was left with what he had created for himself. A man who had moved quickly, assumed control, and found that what he had grabbed it wasn't his to take. He stopped calling me. For 2 weeks, the silence was complete. No text, no voicemails, no messages through relatives. I used that time to understand the shape of what my mother had actually built. It was bigger than I had known. He came to find me at the house on a Thursday evening. I was there to let in a property assessor. I heard his car and turned to see him walking up the path. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. His face was drawn, and there was something brittle in the way he moved, like a person who has been holding themselves together for a long time. I waited on the step. He stopped a few feet away and said, "Why didn't you just stop me?" "The pawn shop. Why didn't you walk in and stop me?" "Because I needed to understand what I was dealing with," I said. "If I had argued with you on the pavement, it would have stayed a family argument. No evidence, no documentation, no record of anything." Something moved across his face. "You let me do it," he said. I stepped back, I said. "That's different. You set me up." "I let you make your own choices," I said. "You signed your name to a document claiming ownership of things you didn't own. You took papers from a box that wasn't yours. You bragged about it. I didn't make any of those decisions. You did." He had nothing to say. He turned and walked back to his car. Mr. Abra called me on a Monday with the full assessment. The clause my mother had inserted into her estate documents was clear. The court had reviewed it alongside the signed draft will and the supporting notes and found it to be a valid expression of intent. The jewelry sale, an unauthorized disposal of designated estate property before probate, had activated the clause. Under its terms, a beneficiary who committed unauthorized disposal of estate assets was disqualified from receiving the portion they would otherwise have been entitled to. That disqualification was not a court punishment. It was a mechanism my mother had built into the documents herself. The court was simply recognizing what she had written. Darius had not lost his inheritance because of me. He had lost it because of a decision he made at a pawn shop on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after our mother died. A decision I had not stopped, because stopping it would have meant nothing except a louder argument on the pavement. My mother had known words alone wouldn't protect what she had built, so she had structured the protection into the documents. And she had made the jewelry visible, deliberately placed where someone careless with her legacy would look first. The final documentation arrived in a thick envelope on a Wednesday. I sat at my kitchen table and went through it page by page. Everything my mother had assembled over 23 years of careful, quiet work. The house, the rental property, the commercial space on Beacon Street, the investment account, the trust instrument, the full contents of the estate, now formally and legally in my name as the sole authorized beneficiary. There was also a personal letter, not a legal document, just a folded sheet of paper with a paperclip, tucked inside the back cover. My mother's handwriting. She had written it 14 months before she passed. On the same day she had gone to Haverfield and Associates with her questions and her notes. She said she loved both her children. She said she had watched both of us carefully over the years and thought long and hard about what was right. She said what she had built should go to the person who understood what it meant to build something slowly, carefully, and with purpose. She did not name either of us in that letter. But she had structured everything so that her answer would be revealed through action. Not her action. She had simply waited to see who we would each choose to be. I did not call Darius with the news. I did not send a message through Aunt Portia or Wade or Miss Elaine. There was nothing to announce. The court documents were on record. The people who needed to know already knew. What I did was drive to the rental property on the east side on a Saturday morning. I let myself in with the key from my mother's envelope and walked through the small 2-bedroom space, empty between tenants. It smelled like fresh paint and old wood. I stood in the main room and looked at the light coming through the window. My mother had bought this building when I was 11, with money saved over 12 years from a job most people considered unremarkable. She never told anyone except her lawyer. She fixed the plumbing herself twice. She managed the tenants quietly and without drama for over a decade. She built things the way strong people build things. Without an audience. I thought about the jewelry in that pawnshop display case. The bangle, the earrings, the brooch. It had hurt to see them there. Still hurt. But they were never the inheritance. He sold my mother's jewelry for quick cash. Let him. Because I already knew what she had left me. And it was everything else.